wherever you may be. I want to give you some good news right off the jump here. 4,170 tests in the MLS, the NHL, the NBA of players and everyone surrounding those players, staff members, just 2 positives. 2 positives out of 4,170 tests in the MLS, the NHL, and the NBA. We're not just going to play sports. We're going to do it, I believe, in a very safe manner, and there's a lot of reason for optimism as we are now 2 days away from Major League Baseball returning. But a lot of people out there right now are debating whether or not high school sports should exist, whether high schools should open. And one of our listeners and readers, a woman by the name of Julia, sent this to me, and I woke up this morning and I read it and I thought, my God, this is well said. And I don't know the guy who wrote it, but he is a high school football coach at McCallie High School, which is a area of Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where this guy coaches. But I think what he said is going to really resonate with many of you all over the country who played high school sports, who watch high school sports. Really matter is coaching or what state or anything else, but I want to give him credit. This is from McCallie High School coach, football coach, Ralph Potter. He is the head coach of McCallie High School, and I want to read his entire post that he put up on Facebook. And I think it will strike many of you as it did me to start off your morning, and it'll make you feel a little bit like you want to run through a brick wall, which is what the best coaches, high school, college, little league, wherever you may be, do. And so I want to read this, and I'm going to allow you guys to react to it as well in the crew and also on the phones. We're taking your calls. We didn't book any guests today. 877-996-6369. Here is Ralph Potter. Again, these are his words, the McCallie High School football head coach. As a high school teacher and coach of high school students, I'd like to add my voice to the debate concerning reopening schools and specifically for playing sports this fall. After being back with our football guys for several weeks, I know 2 things for sure. First, there is a deep, even visceral need among them to return to normalcy. It goes beyond playing a game or getting a formal education. It's a need for communion with one another and with other adults in their lives. Second, there is an absolute willingness to take whatever steps necessary to make a full return possible. None of these guys are unserious about the pandemic. They are anxious to be instructed on what they need to do to protect themselves, their family, and each other. There is no doubt this pandemic is real, is an ongoing threat, and a great tragedy. The easier answer is to say we should shut down schools and sports until we get a vaccine, but there are high costs to be paid. Too high, I think. Many of these costs are being talked about frequently: mountainous debt, millions suffering in poor countries, significant rises in teenage depression, drug use and suicide, and loss of academic and social development. I am reading from a high school football coach at McCallie, the head coach out there. However, these don't describe the whole story. So I want to share some things closer to home for me. I think most coaches of all sports could describe similar thoughts. I'd like you to know that when a young man goes through a football season, he is at a formative stage. The desire that these guys have to play and succeed and the investment of emotion, time, and physical effort they put into it creates an opportunity for deep learning to occur. They go through many unpredictable emotions. They win, they lose, they become a star, they lose their starting position, they struggle with jealousy, disappointment, elation, and success. They learn to love the people that annoy them. At best, they gain a confidence that can't be described. They know they are responsible, they are able, they can endure, they are given real responsibility. Yes, it is just football, but it is real. They know that what they do or don't do really matters. They begin to understand what we mean by communion, that we're each responsible for one another, that we are not alone, that we are not an island. Okay, I'm reading from McCallie head coach Ralph Potter's statement about why his school needs to be back open and why sports need to be happening this fall. This is what goes on every day in our classrooms and playing fields all over our country. You rarely hear about it because destruction is easier and gets more clicks than construction. But it is there, and by it, our society coheres. You can't see it easily when it's taken away. It can't be measured by science objectively. How can you describe the substance of a void, a hole where a structure should have been? It is said that God is the source of all being, that his love is constantly creating the world, creating us. If that's true, then evil is something like the absence of being, a void, a nothingness where life should have been. That's what this is like. What these young people lose, they will never get back. And the longer this goes on, the more catastrophic the loss becomes. So those are the costs that we know, and the price is very high. In this terrible situation in which we find ourselves, these costs must be weighed against the risks, and we must find ways to mitigate those risks as much as possible. We must ask ourselves, what is the end point of this? Perhaps a vaccine will soon be developed. We don't know that for sure, though, and we don't know its effectiveness either. We have to begin to think of what the world looks like if COVID-19 never goes away. For my part, I don't accept the last 3.5 months as a model for what that world will be. Let the young people be raised and formed. The risk to them is minimal. Protect the most vulnerable. Be creative in our solutions to this. Please let them go to school. Let them play. That is Ralph Potter, who announces himself as a teacher and coach at McCallie High School. I think a lot of you, hearing that this morning, you're like, that's exactly right. That is exactly why sports matter so much in this country. And I was struck in particular by the idea of construction versus destruction. How much of what goes on in our society on a day-to-day basis is about destroying instead of constructing? That's a metaphor to me that is really, really interesting to consider. How much of what goes on social media on a day-to-day basis is about tearing down and destroying something as opposed to constructing something anew? And this, to me, is a really big question for a lot of people out there. Because it seems to me that our society is very focused on destruction and not very much focused on construction. And that if you think about the purpose of school in general, it is about construction, right? Yes, there is instruction, but ultimately what we are doing is building up the next generation of kids. And sports is incredibly important as it pertains to constructing young adults who go on to become important members of society. The vast majority of us are not going to have serious sports careers. The vast majority of you out there listening to me right now are not, when you become adults, if you're a kid, you're listening to me right now, are not going to have careers that extend for a very long time. A lot of us have our athletic career in before we even get to high school. A lot of us, probably the majority, have our athletic careers end in high school in some way. Some of you are fortunate enough to go on and play in a serious way in college. A very, very tiny minority of you will go on and play professional sports. But I think the lessons that sports constructs in us are so incredibly important. And when we are talking about not allowing kids out there to be able to be built up, and we are requiring them to shelter in place, and we are saying you have to go stay in your house and you can't go out and try to construct anything in your life right now, we are losing a great deal. And I feel like the overall cost of the coronavirus is not being measured very well by us as a society, because we're looking at what we lose in a tangible sense and not very much considering what we are losing in an intangible sense. And there is a direct result, I believe, why, for instance, drug overdoses are skyrocketing in this country during the midst of the shutdown. I saw in my hometown of Nashville, we are likely to have twice as many people die of drug overdoses at a rate that we have never seen before in the history of the city since the shutdown happened. Why is that? Because humans are innate social animals. And most of us are stronger when we interact together, and we are weaker when we sit around on our phones tweeting and liking things in the privacy of our homes. We are a social animal, a social being. And overall weakness and depravity overcomes us when we decide that we're not going to interact with fellow human beings. And I think many kids out there are uniquely being impacted by this because we think we're doing something good for them by not allowing them to circulate in the United States and go to school and learn and construct the humans and adults that they are going to become. But in the process, we are losing a great deal. And I thought that was so incredibly well said by the high school football coach at McCallie. And I wanted to read it to you this morning and allow many of you to react to that and more. His name is Ralph Potter. And again, I wanted to give him credit for what he said because I believe there are a lot of high school football coaches and a lot of high school coaches in general and teachers who start off their morning listening to this show or this podcast, and what he said struck you as it did me very emotionally because it was so well said. Let's open up the phones. I'll open up the phones when we come back out of this break. I'll take your calls for the rest of the hour. I'll allow you to react to what I just read. 877-996-6369 is the phone number. Double field your calls. We'll line them all up. We'll let you weigh in. Again, props to the McCallie High School football coach. Never met him. Don't know him at all. But one of you sent that to me this morning, and I read it when I woke up, and I said, my God, that's perfectly well said, I believe, to give us all a window into what many coaches across this entire country, the length and breadth of this nation, are thinking as we make decisions about returning to schools and returning to sports for our high school kids. Again, the phone number, 877-996-6369. Out there right now, if you want to dive in to the OutKick universe and support what we do in the most direct fashion you possibly can, sign up and become an OutKick VIP. You get an OutKick VIP phone number, as you've heard some people calling in today on that OutKick VIP line. You get the opportunity to have access to a message board. You can comment on all of our articles, and you get exclusive access to myself, Jason Whitlock, and other writers on our team through the message board and through Zooms. I'm doing a weekly VIP-only Zoom session. Jason Whitlock is doing the same, where you guys can come in, interact with me, ask questions. We've done a couple of those. People seem to absolutely love them. We're going to do more and more. Go sign up at OutKick.com today for the VIP. Your reaction to what I just read about the return of high school football when we return. This is OutKick on Fox Sports Radio.